Hey guys, welcome back to more HOA stories. Imagine getting mystery HOA fines for months, fake rules about your illegal pool and dangerous dog, and then one night you catch a familiar face actually breaking into your fenced yard trying to destroy your pool with a hammer. Let's dive right into the HOA stories. And the first one starts like this. So I've had Charlie for the past 7 years of my life. Charlie is my dog, and as cliche as it sounds, he's my best friend and I wouldn't trade him for anything or anyone in the world. If you're wondering what kind of dog he is a pit bull. Now, upon hearing that, I know a lot of people immediately think that he's aggressive, but he's really not. If anything, the tiny dogs are way more aggressive, but that's a debate for another day. I might be biased, but Charlie is the sweetest pup in the world. He's affectionate, loves belly rubs, licks my face to greet me every time I come back from work, and is just overall a bundle of joy. And sure, he barks a lot and pretty intensely, but usually he does this with just about anyone who gets close to the house, especially if they are strangers. But there hasn't been a single time he's attacked anyone, even if they are coming over to visit. I think it's because he can sense that I'm comfortable with and trusting of the person who's here and knows that both of us are safe. Aren't dogs so smart? Anyways, enough gushing about my dog, let me continue. So for some context, my house is a decent-sized one with a medium-sized pool and a fence surrounding the front and back. Nothing too special other than the pool. The area that I live in is under the jurisdiction of an HOA. They are mostly there for fixing any issues in the neighborhood and problem management. Most of the time I forget that they even exist until I have to pay my monthly fee. They have pretty simple rules, just a couple of no-brainers like don't be too loud, don't park on other people's property, etc. I usually don't break any rules since they are all very easy to follow and there's nothing insanely specific that takes a long time to remember. However, and I'm getting into my story now, a few months ago I started receiving letters saying that I had violated HOA rules by having too big of a pool and too aggressive of a dog. I was very skeptical of the letters because I'd been living here for years and this had never been an issue beforehand. Scam fines are not uncommon for my neighborhood, so I researched the HOA guidelines to confirm whether these papers were legitimate or not. Of course, there were no rules about how big of a pool could be, and the only dog-related rules were that you had to pick up their droppings and that you could only let them outside if they were leashed and that they had to have up-to-date shots. Again, pretty baseline stuff and nothing about aggression. If it were a rule, everyone with a snappy little dog would be done for, but I digress. Figuring that it was just a scam, I threw the papers away. However, I kept receiving the fines and each time they were more expensive than last time because I didn't pay the previous fine or get rid of my pool or dog. I still assumed it was just a scam, but it weirded me out since the HOA symbol looked legitimate. I asked my neighbors if they'd been receiving any HOA fines that seemed like scams or something like that, but everybody said they hadn't. This made me start overthinking a bit. After all, if these were being sent out by someone trying to scam the neighborhood, they would have sent out a fine to everybody and not just me. Plus, how would a scammer know that I have a pool and a dog? It's no secret to everyone that I have a pool or a dog, but still, that felt like some extra effort that a stranger would have to put in to recognize. Worried, I eventually decided to contact the HOA about it, not wanting to unnecessarily pile up a bunch of fines. I called them and they said that I had no outstanding fines and that no fines had been sent to me within the past year, so yeah, that was weird. The fines kept coming, but now with confirmation from the HOA, I just completely ignored them. I still found it weird though that I was the only one being targeted here for this, but since I didn't have any genuine ramifications, I just tried to forget about it. So I certainly didn't think what happened next was gonna happen at all. Sometimes Charlie wakes me up in the middle of the night because he needs to relieve himself, and he usually does this by pawing at the side of my bed, and I hear him because I have wood floor so I can hear his nails scratching it. So on this particular night I took him out as usual, and as I mentioned before, my backyard is fenced, so I'm not really too worried about him when he's out there. Plus I don't think he enjoys being watched anyway. Instead of watching him, I just grabbed myself some water while I waited for him to come back inside. About 5 minutes passed before I started hearing him bark like crazy. Sometimes there are animals that run through the neighborhood like raccoons, cats or rats, so I thought Charlie was barking at one of these. However, it was still pretty late at night and I didn't want to keep him barking, lest I wanted a complaint from one of my neighbors, so I went outside to check on him. Outside, I saw a woman yelling at Charlie with a hammer in her hand. I immediately recognized her as Karen, which is what we will call her, one of the board members from the HOA. Also, breaking into a house without any sort of face covering is absolutely wild. I don't know what she was thinking. Anyway, I asked her what she was doing in my backyard and told her that she had to leave immediately. She kept screaming, practically screeching and shouting at me to get my dog away. I commanded Charlie to come to me, but he was angry and feeling protective, so he was not listening at all. I was about to come over and drag Charlie away when Karen swung at him with her hammer. When I tell you my heart rate spiked to the roof, I honestly thought I was having a heart attack. I thought she had hit Charlie, but luckily she missed and then Charlie bit her calf. At that point, I physically intervened, hauling Charlie away. Also, I'd like to point out here, in defense of my dog, that the bite was not that deep. Charlie is vaccinated and doesn't have rabies or anything, so the bite would not have killed her, but it also was not a deep bite, just a quick snap to the calf. He didn't latch onto her leg or anything, but of course it still hurt. However, Karen was fine. It was just a slight puncture. Anyways, I got Charlie inside. I was gonna call 911, but Karen was already on it herself, screaming at the dispatcher that a violent dog had bit her and that she needed immediate medical attention. When asked for the address, she was so panicked and in pain that she kept mixing up stuff, so I took the phone out of her hands and told my address to the dispatcher, annoyed because she didn't even know my address by heart and was breaking into my house and then calling the cops over. Her behavior was just outrageous. The police came and the ambulance took Karen to the hospital. While Karen was being treated, the officers questioned me. Looking back on everything, I knew I was in the right here and I had no reason to be worried, but still, I was panicking a little bit. I mean, after all, Charlie is a pit bull and pit bulls already have a bad enough representation/reputation as it is. I was afraid that the law would side with Karen because of that. I explained to the officers that Karen had no right to be there and that I had never invited her into my backyard. They took my statement and then left to interrogate Karen. However, Karen was saying the opposite. Karen said that she had a right to go inside my pool because my pool was violating an HOA rule. She also said that Charlie's existence was illegal as well, since it also violated another rule, and she demanded that Charlie be put down because he attacked her out of nowhere. I realized then that Karen had been the one sending in the phony HOA fines. Once they told me this, I explained to them that I'd been receiving the fines for weeks but had confirmation from the HOA that it was all fake. I also said that Charlie only attacked Karen because she had been breaking into my property and because she tried attacking him with the hammer. However, I didn't have any video evidence of this, so it was my word against Karen's. Still though, the officers took what I said into consideration and they interviewed the HOA and investigated the neighborhood, asking my neighbors about the incident, and miraculously, my neighbor said that she had seen Karen approaching my house since her house is 2 stories tall and she was on the 2nd floor looking down onto the street. She had thought to call the cops, but by the time she decided to, I was already out. All of this I got from her. The cops didn't say anything, of course. The HOA also further supported my argument, telling the officers that I had no fines or violations, and pretty soon it was clear that Karen was just lying. I'm not sure what caused Karen to confess, but I'm guessing they turned up the pressure on her now that they were a little more sure that she was in the wrong. So eventually Karen confessed that she had been breaking in to destroy my pool, and because of that she was charged for trespassing and attempted destruction of property. To my absolute relief, there were no repercussions to Charlie whatsoever. Since, obviously, Karen was breaking into my house and Charlie was only acting out of protectiveness to guard me and the house. Therefore, he had the justification to bite her. Karen didn't serve any jail time for the trespassing, but she did have to pay a fine. And what I think was even worse for her was the fact that everyone knew about it by the end of the week. Pretty much everyone who was not a close friend turned their backs on her. She was not well liked in the first place because she generally used her position in the HOA to her own advantage, trying to boss people around with it, which is what she did with me, as you can see. However, since then, she had never gone so far as to commit a literal crime when trying to enforce her will. So this made everyone want to distance themselves even more from her, and to add on to that, the HOA took away Karen's position, saying she had been abusing the power way too much. Now, with no real authority to scare anyone with, everyone who only talked to her for the sake of keeping the peace was just gone, and the HOA apologized to me. Out of curiosity, I asked them why Karen had been so vehement on getting rid of my pool and my dog, and honestly, they were not sure. Karen just always had a vendetta against pools and she was scared of dogs, which to me is a little dumb. Why would you break into a house that you know has a dog, especially a big scary dog, then? But anyway, I still have my pool and thankfully my dog, so that is all that matters. Honestly, I'm kind of glad that Karen was finally served some karma. I'm not the kind of person to wish vengeance or ill upon another person, even if I dislike them or if they've done me wrong. But Karen messed with Charlie, and that crossed a line for me. And the next one is a super satisfying story that is titled, I demand to be put in a seat that is able to recline. So a few years ago, I was on a flight from LA to Singapore, takes 16+ hours. I'm a tall dude around 6'3", 190 centimeters, so I don't fit very well in economy class seats. On most planes, my knees are often very close or right up against the seat in front of me. This makes it impossible for the person in front of me to recline their seat, which usually is not a problem once the person in front of me sees how cramped I am in those tiny seats. However, for this particular flight, the man in front of me was not having it. He tried to recline his seat but couldn't because my legs were there. He turns around and sees what's happening and asks me something along the lines of, "Do you mind letting me put my seat back?" I respond with, "I wish I could, but I physically can't. I will do my best to give you as much space as I can, but it won't be much." At this point, he starts to get angry and just starts pushing as hard as he can back on his seat. Needless to say, this was not particularly pleasant for me. I ask him to please stop and he says, "I'll stop when I can put my seat back." So I decide I will just wait him out, he'll eventually get tired. After about 10 or 15 minutes of this, he calls a flight attendant over and proceeds to demand a new seat. The flight attendant tells him there are no available seats and he will have to deal with it. He demands to speak to the pilot now, so the flight attendant goes up front to talk to the cockpit. Just keep in mind that throughout this, he is still pressing with all his might against my knees with only short breaks to yell at the flight attendants. After a couple of minutes, the co-pilot, he wanted to speak to the pilot and won't be happy about this, comes back and tries to explain to the man that he cannot change seats because there are no other coach seats free. The man continues to demand a seat that is able to recline, give me an upgrade, this is unacceptable, making a scene, etc. The co-pilot finally gives in and says while looking at the man, "Sir, would you like to sit up in business class?" The man stands up and mutters something similar to, "Finally," to which the co-pilot responds, "Sir, sit down, I was not talking to you." He turns to me and repeats, "How would you like a seat in business class?" I have, to this day, never seen someone as furious as the man as I walked past him to my new business class seat with free drinks. And the next one is titled, Apartment Manager Does Not Take Cash for 2-cent Bill. Malicious Compliance Ensues. So in 2019, I moved from an apartment complex in Celebration, Florida to a condo. As usual, when you move out of an apartment, you get a final bill which includes your last month's prorated rent, deductions for damages, security deposit refunds, and the like. We paid it. The next month, I get a call from my wife who says, "We've got a follow-up bill in the mail from the apartment management company for 2 cents. We are both in the tech field, so we laughed that this company's IT department did not catch the edge case of spending 50 cents in postage to collect 2 cents in revenue, but it happens. My wife prints out a copy of the bill, I grab 2 cents from the changed jar. The apartment complex is on my daily drive, so I swing by the office, I walk in and tell the manager that I want to pay my last bill. I say it is 2 cents. Here is the bill, and I have the 2 cents if you want it. The manager says, "We don't take cash." Nothing else. There was an awkward pause. I say, "I don't expect you to take cash." I expect both of us to have a laugh about how silly computer systems are and for you to write off the 2 cents because it would cost you more to process the payment, but she says, "I'm not gonna do that." Again, awkward pause. I say, "So you want me to write you a check for 2 cents and then mail it? And you're gonna process that check?" The manager says, "Yeah, send us a check and we'll process it," and then walks back into her office to end the conversation. So I go home and set up an automatic monthly bank payment to my apartment complex for 3 cents. And then, because I'm a programmer, I write some code to send a letter once per month saying, "I'm so sorry, I've overpaid my bill. Please send me a check for the overpayment." And I use an online service that sends postcards in ridiculous sizes up to around 18 inches by 24 inches, figuring that'll be my escalation strategy. And the first of the month, I get a call from the apartment company's regional manager, and after introducing himself, the next 2 minutes were the most sincere, "Oh God, we made a mistake. Please don't do this. We will never contact you again" apology anyone could have hoped for. I stopped the mail and never heard from them again. Did I spend several hours on malicious compliance for 2 cents? Yes. Was it worth it? Absolutely. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Just to get this off the bat, I changed the names of the places and names in this story so I don't dox myself. I hope you don't mind. Anyway, Turtle Creek is a great town, it is quiet, safe, has great schools and even better churros. That is what brought my family here years ago. We love the town, so we spent months searching for the perfect property in Turtle Creek. Our biggest hang-up when searching for a house was that we didn't want to live in an HOA community. We are a creative family and I wanted the freedom to change my paint, rocks and whatever else I saw fit on my schedule. It took some searching, but we finally found the perfect Turtle Creek home outside of all the local association boundaries. We triple-checked our HOA-free status with the property inspector, the realtor and the records office before we happily closed the deal. Thank goodness we had the forethought to steer clear of the HOA, because just 1 year after moving to Turtle Creek, we started hearing loads of rumors about the local HOA president. He was said to be a nosy man who carried a ruler in his pocket, always ready to measure a hedge and fine you if you stepped out of line. My hairdresser even mentioned getting a fine along with a rudely worded citation about the color of her pansies and that she had the prettiest garden in town. I listened to my neighbor's stories with empathy, but I was secretly happy that I was safely outside of the fray. My little plot of land was on the neighboring outskirts of the crazy pansy policeman's jurisdiction. The homeowners association that he presided over consisted of properties 1 street south of me and beyond, and I knew because I reviewed the maps so thoroughly when we made our move, so when my friends asked how I stay so calm with this HOA tyrant around, I just urged them to move to a new street. I was the shoulder my HOA-suffering neighbors could cry on for a long time, until their nightmare became mine too. About 5 years after moving to Turtle Creek, I was having a few friends over for lunch when the HOA threat became apparent. My neighbors from a few streets south were trading war stories about what this puffed-up nobody running their association was doing. "He is a tyrant, he's always in everyone's business, and I swear he has his eyes on more," my friend Sarah said. "More?" I asked. "Yeah," Sarah said. "I went to the last board meeting and he was talking like a dictator." Everyone around the table laughed. "You're so dramatic," my friend Mary said. "No, really, he said that HOAs should be focused on gaining more land and collecting more dues. He practically took his shoe off and slammed it on the podium," Sarah said. Everyone laughed again at Sarah's dramatic flair, but I couldn't help but worry that there was some truth in her story. What if this nutjob was trying to expand the HOA? Would he come to my street? Not 2 weeks later I got my answer. Mr. Hill, the president of the local HOA, who my friends were always complaining about, rang my doorbell. I saw his face through the window next to the door as I approached. I recognized him from a picture I had seen in the local newspaper. I froze. I knew what he would want from me, but all I had to do was stand my ground and resist any offer he made to join the HOA. And well, ripe stars, I guess in this case, joining the HOA means basically signing a pact with the devil. But I suppose if the offer is enticing, who knows? Anyway, I opened the door and said, "Hello?" He said, "Hello, I'm Mr. Hill. I'm the head of the local HOA." "Nice to meet you," I said, although it was anything but nice to meet him. "Likewise, I just wanted to introduce myself and talk a little bit about our little association," he said. "Look, I have to stop you right there," I said. "Thanks for stopping by, but I'm not open to any buyout deals or anything like that. We actually like living outside of the HOA jurisdiction, and we are not willing to change that." A haunting smirk grew across his face. It unsettled me. "Well, that's the thing, isn't it? HOA jurisdiction? You might have thought I was here to buy you out or entice you to join, but I'm actually here to call you out," he said. I felt stunned. What was he talking about? Call me out for what? Excuse me? You say you enjoy living outside of the HOA? Well, you've been living within the HOA lines this whole time, shirking your dues, and we have the documents to prove it," he said, pointing his finger at me rudely. "We certainly have not been. Our property is outside of your lines. I've seen the records that prove it, and anything you have seen is just garbage." "Call them garbage, but I have the papers that state this property is part of the HOA. Moreover, you owe past dues and need to get your land up to code," he said. I could not believe the audacity of this man. He was exactly as inflated as my friends had described, and it was not a good look. I took a deep breath and resolved to get rid of him as politely as I could in my enraged state of mind. I don't know who you think you are coming over here with these accusations. My family lives here peacefully and we are a vital part of this town. And by the way, I've only ever heard negative things about the bully that you are, so I suggest you get off my doorstep, I said. For a moment, Mr. Hill just stood there looking red-faced, and finally he realized he was beaten. He left shaking his head angrily. I felt triumphant for chasing him away, but I knew that would not be the last that I saw of Mr. Hill or the money-grubbing HOA. About a week later, I started receiving fines in the mail demanding the dues. It became a landslide of letters and bills asking for astronomical sums of money, all labeled as late dues. We even received a handwritten letter from Mr. Hill where he again referenced documents that put our land within HOA jurisdiction, but I knew they were fake. It all came to a head when one morning I was woken up an hour earlier than my alarm by the sounds of construction. I looked out my window and suddenly I was seeing red. Out on the lawn was a group of contractors demolishing our fences. I woke up my husband. He also couldn't believe what was going on. Neither of us had hired them, but at that moment I knew who might be behind this. While my husband threw his boots on to give the contractors hell, I got on the phone with our lawyer. They assured me they would draft a cease and desist order and send it to not just Mr. Hill, but every member of the HOA board. After talking to the lawyer, I spoke with my husband. What did the workers say? I asked. They said they were hired by the HOA to bring the fence up to code. They showed me some phony paperwork saying that our lot is within the HOA boundaries. Why do you think it was phony? Because it was the same document the realtor showed us when we moved, but with a different set of addresses for the boundary line and a couple janky looking signatures, he said. I'm calling our lawyer back, I said. After my call, the lawyer assured me that they would be opening an official inquiry into Mr. Hill and the HOA at large. A few weeks later, the investigation proved that the documents that the president had used as his armor were in fact forged. I felt so vindicated knowing that we were right all along. Our house was outside of the HOA boundary and always would be. The investigation proved that Mr. Hill had acted without authority over the property and forged the documents to make his false authority look even stronger. I was no law expert, but I knew this spelled disaster for him and I did not care. From controlling my neighbors' gardening whims to harassing and shaking down residents, this guy was a total sleaze. So it was no surprise when my lawyer stopped by to tell me the news. Mr. Hill was charged with forgery, fraud and trespassing, he said. Wow, they nailed him! Yeah, and what's more is that he can never hold a position on a housing board again. He will also have to pay your legal fees, his own legal fees and a hefty fine, plus 3 months in jail, and he said he cannot pay, so it's likely he will lose his house to the fees as well. Well, that means no more Mr. Hill in town. I was stunned. I never thought we'd be able to get this guy on so many charges, but it was a gift. I could already imagine Sarah's impression of the HOA president measuring the space between jail bars with his little pocket ruler, and it made me smile. Is he the only one? No, Mr. Hill was directly responsible for the forged documents and the trespassing, but the whole HOA board has been slapped with some fees and a restructuring order. That way they won't be tempted to pull any new scams. Plus, if they don't raise the money for their fees, they might have to disband, the lawyer said. I felt complete relief. Finally, someone had taken on the HOA and won. Thank you, Turtle Creek just became a safer place to live without those thugs. I said, it never would have happened if not for you. Way to go. And the next one is another malicious compliance story and it is titled, Don't want to give me a new contract? Fine, I will stick to the terms of the contract that I do have. So I used to work for a large retailer in the UK. I worked there for 12 years in total and ended up as a manager. When you want to become a manager, they make you fly through 1000 hoops, do a whole bunch of training and do the job for 6 months without any extra pay. I did all of this and was finally officially signed off as a manager. After I was officially given a job, I got my pay raise but was never given a new contract. I asked multiple times for a new contract and was fobbed off each time. Fast forward about 9 months and another larger retailer started hiring lots of managers and was poaching a whole bunch of staff. I applied for one of these jobs as they were offering £8,000 more than I was currently on, but for the same job. I got the job and went to hand in my notice. Managers have to give 4 weeks notice, whereas general assistants only have to give a week. So I decided that I would follow the exact terms of my contract and provide them with a week's notice rather than the 4 weeks they wanted. Suffice to say, they were not happy with that, and I got called into an office to ask why I had only given 1 week's notice. I explained that per the terms of the last contract that I signed with them, that is all that I was required to give. They were really not happy, but there really wasn't anything they could do about it. And yeah guys, I hope you enjoyed the malicious compliance. If you did, please like the video and I will see you again tomorrow.